Squares and cubes are very special forms of numbers written in index form, or another way of saying that are special numbers, special types of numbers with exponents. Let's first look at squares or square numbers. Think about a square. And this is a rough sketch. And let's say that that had a side of 3. We know that all of the sides of a square are equal, and we also know that to get the area of a square, we multiply the height times the length, or the length times the width, okay? So the area of this square is just going to equal 3 times 3. We know, however, from our work with exponents that 3 times 3 is just the same thing as 3 to the power of 3, or 3 with an exponent of 2, or 3 with an index of 2. Because, though, we are referring to the area of a square, and this represents that area, we have come to call all numbers with the index of 2, or with an exponent of 2, square numbers. Or so another way of writing this then would be 3 squared. And what we mean by squared then is just to multiply that number by itself 2 times, 3 times 3. So if I were to say 7 squared, I would just be talking about 7 raised to the second power, or 7 with an index of 2. And we can work out all of the squares and write a complete list of them, and it'll look like this. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared, 4, 3 squared, 9, 4 squared, 16, etc., etc., etc. And this is the list as we go down. And, it would probably be helpful for you to write them out yourselves. Don't copy them down, but actually work them out and find out what all of the squares are. Learn them just the same way that you would have learned your timetables. So that's squares, okay? Square simply is a number raised to the power of 2. What about cubes? Well, again, we go back to our geometry, and I know we haven't studied it yet, but most of you would have come across it at some point. Instead of looking at a square this time, the geometric shape that we're going to be thinking of is, yep, you guessed it, a cube. Now, I know that this is not exactly the greatest drawing of a cube, but there it is, something like that. And we know, let's say that we had the length, the width of that was 4, then that would mean the length is also 4, and the height is also 4. But now, this time, instead of talking about the area of that cube, we're going to talk about the volume. In other words, what is the space inside of that cube? What is the space inside of that box that's shaped with all equal sides, all equal faces? Well, we know that the volume is the length times the breadth, or width, times the height, and we know that all of those measurements are equal in a cube, so it's just going to be 4 times 4 times 4, and just as with the square, we could write this using the exponent or the index notation, and so this just becomes, instead of 4 to the power of 2, since we have 3 4s here multiplied by themselves, it's going to be 4 to the power of 3. And therefore, instead of writing 4 to the power of 3, we can also use the common term, and that would be 4 cubed. So any number cubed then just means that same number multiplied by itself 3 times. 7 cubed, and I don't know my keep picking 7, but anyway, 7 cubed is just going to be equal to 7 to the power of 3. 214 cubed is just going to be equal to 214 to the power of 3. And again, we can look at our list of cubes. You can write them out yourself. You can work them out yourself. And when we look at the list, they're going to be just like this. We calculate them the same way that we calculated the list of squares. Only thing, instead of multiplying the numbers by themselves once, we do it twice. So 1 cubed is 1, 2 cubed is 8, 3 cubed 27, 4 cubed 64, 5 cubed 125, 6 cubed 216, 7 cubed 343, 8 cubed 512, 9 cubed 729, etc., etc., etc. Of course, 10 cubed, note, is the simplest of all because it's just a 1 and 3 zeros. And that, in fact, that's how we always raise 10 to the power of any value. We just write the number of zeros that we have the power. And you can remember that when we did the decimal place value system. So that's really all there is to squares and cubes. Hope this helped.